Imagine this: a prominent law professor is murdered in cold blood in his garage, and a crime that shocked the legal world. But what if, just months before it happened, his ex wife gives a national level interview, painting their marriage in unexpectedly bleak tones? That interview has largely been forgotten until now. Welcome back to Moms for Justice. I am Carolyn. Today, we are going to dive into a lesser known aspect of Wendi Adelson. This is regarding a 2000 Truman Scholarship recipient interview that she did just before the murder of Dan Markel. So, this rarely heard interview is part of the Truman Scholarship Association, okay? And in 2000, Wendi Adelson was a Truman Scholar. She was awarded this wonderful scholarship, and Wendi won the prestigious national award to support graduate studies at Brandeis University. This is an honor that put her on a track many could only dream of. Quote, Truman Scholars are selected annually for academic merit, leadership potential, and a commitment to public service. Now, this is something that Wendi Adelson was deeply involved in. The award is often a stepping stone towards graduate school, social impact careers, and high achievement paths. In the early 2010s, at a time when her life seemed very promising, Wendi published her book, a novel, and it was reportedly slated that she would speak at Florida State University in August 2014. This was pre-scheduled, and this engagement where she'd speak at would be about 2 months after the murder of Dan Markel. This was to celebrate her book, and according to commentators, the novel had even been selected as required reading for incoming FSU freshmen. Now, to likely commemorate this moment, the Truman Scholars Association published a special profile/interview on Wendi Adelson, a profile that in retrospect becomes very chilling given the timeline of all this. The first thing I want to do is go over a little bit of her book, This Is Our Story. So essentially, this is a self-published piece of garbage. And this is by someone who comes from serious money. The Adelson family, they have lots of money. This is the kind of money where you would assume a decent editor would be affordable. So she ended up, though, allegedly having to buy her own book just to hand it out to incoming freshmen at Florida State University. And then they were required to read it. This is nothing but mandatory homework, right? That's what it seems like to me. Unfortunately, though, required reading doesn't magically make bad writing good, okay? The book is clunky, it's very amateurish, and it's dripping in self-importance, which is right up Wendi Adelson's alley. So essentially, this is a self-published piece of garbage. And I managed to survive skimming a couple chapters when I stumbled upon it in a library. Yeah, because I won't buy that book. But it went straight into the garbage. Okay? No, literally. Like, I didn't even put it back on the shelf. It went into a garbage can. Honestly, was probably the most meaningful contribution I could have done for Wendi Adelson. So before I go into the interview, let me just say, Wendi Adelson's novel, This Is Our Story, is self-published, and I heard the printing contract she signed didn't even include complimentary author copies. As a result, she reportedly had to buy her own book to donate it to Florida State University. Several former freshmen have recalled receiving this book at orientation, though very few actually read it. One student described the experience as very unsettling to read because the protagonist clearly dislikes her husband, and this was the same semester that Dan Markel was murdered. Although this is marketed as a story about human trafficking and immigration work, the book functions largely as obvious autobiographical fiction. A significant portion really mirrors Wendi's life as an attorney married to a law professor in Tallahassee, thinly disguised as Hiawassee Springs. The main character is Lily, and she portrays her husband, who's Josh Stone, as socially awkward, emotionally unavailable, and generally incompetent. Readers familiar with this case have pointed out how transparent these portrayals are and how sharply they contradict the public image Wendi later attempts to present. The book received very poor reviews. Many found it unpolished and self-focused and lacking in any kind of narrative craft whatsoever. What makes the situation even more striking is Wendi's handling of her real marriage in the materials surrounding this book. She did not acknowledge Dan Markel at all in her author's bio, and they were still married at the time. He apparently arranged an FSU Meet the Author event and praised her intellect publicly and helped elevate her book on campus. According to attorney Stephen Webster, Dan did in fact read the novel, and Wendi later claimed otherwise. The book also ended up profiled by the Florida Bar Association and even made its way into the Duke Law Library, placements that likely stemmed from Dan's professional standing rather than Wendi's literary merit. Observers of the Markel trials have pointed out that the book contains more detail about her dissatisfaction with marriage and life in Tallahassee. Way more than about legal issues it claims to explore. Altogether, this novel is self-styled as a narrative centered on her frustrations, her resentments, and her version of the marriage. And this is published just years before a murder that would later place every detail under a microscope. I'm going to read a couple sections that I highlighted from some excerpts from the book. Okay, number 1. Quote, Josh and I met at a mixer for young professionals in D.C. and hit it off from the first minute. Well, Dan and Wendi, they met in D.C. If I'm not mistaken, when her mother goes on J-Date to find Dan Markel for Wendi, she finds that he's located at that time in D.C. and at the same time that Wendi is there. So that is when Wendi and Dan started dating. So there's just a similarity you don't hear a lot. Quote, we moved to Hiawassee Springs, Florida. Assistant professor of English at NFSU. Wow. That sounds really familiar. Law professor at FSU. Quote, Josh and I arrived in Hiawassee Springs. It was pouring rain, which was just as well, because it obscured the fact that Hiawassee Springs was, shall we say, less than I had expected. It's my own fault, really, not having done enough research. I just assumed, and we all know what assuming does, that Hiawassee Springs was in Florida and would be just like other parts of Florida that I knew from visiting my grandparents. I assumed there would be palm trees and a beach and sunburned Canadians, and that North Florida was basically just like South Florida. Lily, Lily, Lily. I definitely found out how wrong you can be with assumptions. Still, I have Josh. We have our health, and I like to think I have a good sense of humor about life. Turns out I have a good sense of humor, but only about other people's lives. I am quite humorless about my own, or at least I was. Hiawassee Springs changed everything. So in April 2014, TSA reached out to do a piece on her, and they asked her interview questions to highlight her as a former TSA scholar from the year 2000. So it's no longer available to see on the internet on the Truman Scholars Association website. I located this through the Wayback Machine. If you guys don't know what that is, it's an online archive that captures snapshots of websites over time. Now, when a page gets deleted or removed from a long time ago, the original versions will often still exist in a digital archive, which is a place that a lot of people go to, like the Wayback Machine, to find old internet websites, et cetera, et cetera. So I searched the TSA website via the Wayback Machine, and there it was. I was able to pull it up. So I'm so excited to share it with you. Here is a copy of it right here, guys. I'm going to go ahead and read the intro to it, okay? So human trafficking is a term most of us are familiar with, yet the realities of its meaning are held at a safe distance. Like a tenable mystery, we're not all that eager to explore with our magnifying glass. Even though who considers themselves well-read and up to speed on current events would probably be astounded by what they don't know that they don't know about this criminal underworld. Wendi's insightfully gritty novel, This Is Our Story, changes that for every reader who dares to enter that world through the gut-wrenching experiences of Rosa and Mila, the compelling voices that draws us in and leaves us unwilling to remain uninformed and uninvolved. Wendi's signature writing style healthy sense of humor, and thought-provokingly intimate presentation of Rosa and Mila's stories is exactly the mastery needed to lead the reader through the pages with grace and strength, and at the perfect tempo. The women's immigration attorney, Lily, has her own story as well, which adds invaluable texture and multifaceted dimension to the indelible imprint of this book on the social justice consciousness of anyone who reads it. Wendy's book has just been selected by Florida State University as featured reading provided to thousands of incoming freshmen this year, and Wendy has been asked to speak at the new student convocation ceremony on August 24th. Clinical professor and the director of the Medical Legal Partnership at FSU's College of Law, Wendi, who is a native Floridian, had this to say about what informed her decision to become a lawyer and how she arrived at Florida State University. Quote, "In college, I was looking for any way to learn Spanish so that I could connect with more people. I got a fellowship to work with families of the disappeared post-Dirty War in Argentina. During that war in Buenos Aires in the summer of 1999, I met Adolfo Perez Esquivel, who is a Nobel Peace Prize winner. I started spending 2 days a week with him at his camp for kids. I would wake up at 5:30 in the morning and wait for him for a while on a cold subway platform. When he arrived, we would drive for 2 hours each way out to the campo to connect with 15 or so kids, teach them computers and life lessons, and then head back to the city. During that time with Adolfo, I was so impressed with the way that he worked with individual people, but also spent time traveling around the world giving talks on the movement against violence. I realized then that I wanted to develop a skill set that I could use to help individual people, but also to advance larger policies. I thought law was a good tool for social change to use in that regard. I screwed up fantastically and ended up with a dream job as a clinical law professor. I fell in love with the wrong man, and he got a job in Tallahassee. I had wanted to be in D.C. or become a foreign service officer, or in the previous few years lived closely to my family in South Florida. So ill-fated romance took me to Tallahassee, and love for my children keeps me here. My children are 3 and 4, 14 months apart. Much of the last 4 years has been a giant blur. They are my heart, walking around outside of my body, and every decision related to my career has been made with them in mind. I was offered my dream job of directing an immigration clinic in another city when I was 7 months pregnant with my older son, and I turned it down because I didn't know what his needs would be when he was born, or how being a mother would change my perspective on work and family. And now, I've received offers for more lucrative employment, but not with the same kind of flexibility. And so I turned them down as well. Because what matters most to me today is that I can spend the most amount of quality time with my lovies. The interviewer then asked Wendi to explain a little bit about the Medical Legal Partnership. Quote, "The Medical Legal Partnership is a clinical legal program, which means that we use experimental learning. We partner with a local community health clinic and represent homeless, indigent, undocumented, and physically mentally ill persons with their petitions for disability and immigration legal services to teach law students how to practice law. Students do every aspect of a case, from performing intake, doing research, and filing applications, petitions, and advocating for a client in administrative court. This past week, we advocated with various senators and representatives for Medicaid expansion in Florida. We brought one of our clients who falls within the coverage gap to show the senators and representatives who voted against expansion the human face that loses when they make political choices. I also run an alternative spring break program where law and medical students provide legal assistance to migrant farm workers and their families and learn about the impact of farm work. on individual and family health. We also learn how the law can impact other social determinants of health. This time, our students went to one of the parking lots where workers congregate for work at 5:30 a.m. And we talk with a crew leader about her life and her work as a young migrant farm worker and as an adult crew leader. Wendy's motivation to write This Is Our Story is best summarized in her own words here. Quote, "As a clinical law professor, I sometimes feel like a reluctant academic. The idea of being an academic inspires visions of the ivory tower, where conversations about the law take place amongst lofty people with powdered wigs. I mean no offense to the British. I am focused on real-world legal practice, largely around the issue of immigration. Thus, most often when someone asks me what I do for a living, I respond, public interest lawyer or immigration lawyer, but the good kind that doesn't rip people off. It is important to me to describe what I do in terms of its relation to the clients we serve, the community at large, and the inherent opportunity to serve the public good. So circa 2008, when I was working as an immigration attorney at the Florida State University for Advanced Placement of Human Rights, a lofty title for a building with a dilapidated staircase into the old house-turned-organization, and an office barely big enough to house the hot water heater that sat next to my desk, I discovered that there was an inconsistency in the laws that favored children who were victims of sex trafficking, but seemingly mischaracterized kids that had been prostituted as criminals. I thought this was very interesting, and I still do. But as I sat down to write an article on the aesthetic differences in these laws, I discovered that what I most wanted to do was tell my clients' stories, and mine, what it means to be a public interest lawyer, to a broader audience. For the previous few years, I had represented abused immigrant women, immigrant children who fled violence and abuse at home, persecuted people seeking asylum, and victims of human trafficking. Instead of writing an article for a legal publication primarily read by legal academics and practitioners, no offense meant to the legal scholars out there, I wanted to write my clients' stories. I wanted to give voice to the population that often have none. I wanted people to know how criminals and traffickers exploit human vulnerabilities, what the experience of being trafficked is actually like, and the struggle to piece together broken lives when and if it ends. I wrote this novel, putting in hours each day for 2 years, finishing just before my first son was born. I then spent the next 2 years trying to find an agent or a publisher to no avail, and gave birth to my second son during that time while continuing to work. Finally, in 2011, I decided to self-publish. The chance to publish with an academic publisher came in 2012. Now, in 2014, I am thrilled that my novel, This Is Our Story, has been selected by Florida State University for their One Book, One Campus initiative. Over the summer, 7,000 incoming freshmen will engage with the issue of human trafficking by reading and discussing my book. This is both an honor and an opportunity to educate students on this deeply important issue. I am hopeful that being exposed to my clients' stories will make an impact on the class of 2018. Maybe one of these fresh people will pursue a career in mental health and provide services to trafficked persons recovering from trauma. Perhaps some of the law students that I teach in Tallahassee, Florida will also represent victims of human trafficking. These possibilities make me less of a reluctant academic because they represent the possibility that the modern university can fuel real-world change. Maybe one day, when my boys are no longer in diapers, they will bring me to school for career day. proud that their mom is a clinical law professor. What is so incredibly interesting about this is that he was alive when this was taken. This interview was done and he was completely alive and present in her life. Notice she rarely mentions anything about Dan. Notice how the pridefulness is just screaming out of this interview. Another thing I wanted to show you guys. So in 2016, this article was published in Above the Law, and it was from a fellow law professor who calls her comments chilling. Okay, Wendi Adelson on her ill-fated romance with Dan Markel. I screwed up fantastically and ended up with a dream job as a clinical law professor. I fell in love with the wrong man, and he got a job in Tallahassee. I had wanted to be in D.C. or become a Foreign Service officer, or in the previous few years, live closely to my family in South Florida. So, ill-fated romance took me to Tallahassee, and love for my children keeps me here. That was highlighted at the top of this article. And it is, pretty compelling that he wrote about this back in 2016. His name is David Latt. He's the founder and managing editor of Above the Law and the author of Supreme Ambitions, a novel, not about Wendi, by the way. He's just highlighting from the Tax Prof blog by Paul Karen, and he calls it chilling. Although those obsessed with the case may have seen it before in message board threads, it's consistent with Adelson's podcast musings about her marriage. I thought I could cheat the system by marrying a man I lacked passionate love for. We all remember that interview that was done writing class lessons. It was pretty incredible what she said on that. I did do a video on that. It's a little further back in my library of Adelson videos.
10 months ago, someone killed the father of my children. First we got divorced, and then he got murdered. In casual conversations, I don't know whether to call him my ex-late spouse or my late ex-spouse. Last July, someone, and we still don't know who, shot my ex-husband point blank in the back of the head as he pulled into our garage after driving our then 3- and 4-year-old sons to preschool. We married when I was in my mid-20s, when I thought I could cheat the system and marry a man I lacked passionate love for because, hey, didn't that die anyway during marriage? I saw his intellect and big heart and thought he would make a wonderful father for my children. Our marriage dissolved after the children arrived, as the loneliness of being married to someone that didn't view me as an equal crept in. I do believe he loved me the best way he knew how. I mean, he didn't like fiction, so why read my novel? It was logic, not a lack of love. It feels sacrilegious these days, even to suggest something less than heroic about my late ex-husband, because he was murdered. He died violently and young, and likely at the hands of a professional killer. And the media had a field day in response. I turned on the news to find photos of my children with Nancy Grace, George Stephanopoulos saying my name in reference to our acrimonious divorce, and a picture my friend took when I was her maid of honor showed as evidence why I should be treated like a murder suspect, and not the mother of 2 fatherless boys. I sat on a bench last week to watch the boys play. An older woman sitting next to me commented on how adorable my boys are and asked, "What does your husband do?" I hate this question. I haven't yet said, he doesn't do much because he's dead, but I think it sometimes. I find when I tell people that my children's father died, they feel sad. But when they ask the follow-up questions and find out we weren't married, they seem to feel better. I don't. My mom and I have lived together for almost a year. She is selfless, generous, loving, and beautiful. She thinks she is fat. She once got turned down for Weight Watchers because she didn't have enough excess weight to be admitted to the program. She thinks she is stupid. My mom, who won the New York Spelling Bee for middle schoolers when she was only in the 6th grade. I'm so many of the things I am because of who my mom is and who she wants me to be. I was valedictorian of my high school. She seemed proudest that I graduated high school still a virgin. I try to draw boundaries with my mom because lately there aren't any. She is caring for my children right now so that I can be here in class, more like a co-parent than a grandmother. But I accept it because as a former kindergarten teacher, she is so adept in that role. She taught my boys how to recite the 44 presidents, just like she taught me when I was 4. I see myself in them, reciting, receiving praise. She has completely changed her life because mine fell apart. I write letters to her in my head every day, ones of immense gratitude for facilitating my return from the bottom. But when we speak, in the few fleeting moments when the kids or my dad don't need something, it comes out like, "Is the dishwasher clean? And if not, should I run it?" Or something else inconsequential about laundry or groceries or aspects of daily life.
My childhood friend Lisa told me this weekend that she never even knew I was unhappy in my marriage. I had no idea I hid it so well. I always thought that I had an expressive face, the kind that easily registered happiness and disappointments. But the more I think about it, the more I realize that most people think I am very happy all of the time, because I smile constantly to try to engage with people, make them smile too. I think this face is a kind of mask that I wear out of a life of endless practice, like a kind of muscle memory for the face. I can even remember one time learning that a friend's father had died, and upon hearing the news, I smiled. It was a bizarre reaction, since I loved my friend and her dad very much. We were 13, and I remember him making pancakes for us many a Sunday morning after a few of us slept over. More than 20 years later, I still feel like a freak show thinking back on that moment. If I'm a person that likes to be funny and to use humor and levity to engage with people, then is it an authentic or inauthentic response to smile at the news of something tragic? Am I deluding others or myself when I smile or laugh through the pain of a terrible time? Am I avoiding actually bathing in the grief I need to feel so that when time passes, I will have missed my chance to mourn? Danny used to tell me that everyone thought I was such a nice person and such a good person, but he was the only one that knew the truth about what a bad person I was. He was convinced I had deluded everyone but him.
It should be intimate when a man cries in front of you while you hold each other, and it was, but I wasn't crying. Sometimes I feel like I'm all cried out. This year I told my small children that their father was dead and wasn't ever coming back. And a few nights ago, when a beautiful man teared up in my arms, I wondered if I could ever cry at something beautiful again. I shared a piece of writing with him I was trying out for class. It describes a scene where I am immensely sad. He tells me he was initially impressed with all that I have accomplished, but now he's more taken with what I have endured. I appreciate his words and wonder, why can't I be that woman on the spot? Why do I reserve the written word for a place where I can accurately and painfully express myself, and the in-person, real-life version for the Wendi show, jazz hands and all? I wish I could merge us so we could be less of a weirdo.
You asked, how are we doing really? And I was shaking from head to toe, and I thought, okay, let's just do this. Let's just dive in. I didn't have a plan to do it, but it just felt unavoidable. The words kind of just flew out of me, but then when I was done, I sat there and I couldn't look anyone in the eye, and I was sweaty, and I just thought, okay, now I've done it. Now it's out there. Now what? I felt good. I felt good about the class's reaction. I realized that people had questions, and so some of them were about the writing and how, what might be different ways to tell the same story, and other questions were a bit more like, well, what happened here and what was going on there? And I thought, oh, I don't know if you remember this. I didn't know we were all going to read what we wrote in class. I thought maybe some of us would read if we felt like it, and I didn't think that would be me. I think for me, a lot of the additional pain I felt, on top of the murder and everything associated with, was it felt unfair that I couldn't at least tell my own story, that the story got told for me. So I think there was an aspect of empowerment, of being able to say, no, this is my side of the story. This is what things looked like from my perspective.
list, but I just definitely wanted to point out that people were talking in this interview most people do not know about. And you can read it if you go through the Wayback Machine and you go find it. Here it is again, the interview. Let me show you right here. And this is where I was reading from, guys. It's all here. It has her quotes and the questions that were asked by the interviewer. It's pretty interesting. 3 months later, Dan Markel was murdered. Thank you for joining me today. Make sure you guys are liking this video, subscribe, and share, and I will see you next time.